All right, it looks like we are live. Welcome everybody to the Penwell Fire Engineering Humpday Hangout. It is the first Wednesday of the month. Hopefully we have some folks out there joining us live today. We've got a really important topic, and a topic that can be, I don't want to say controversial, but certainly emotional and is a very big thing. And our topic for today is line of duty death case studies, honoring sacrifice through training. Certainly studying the past is very, very important to all of our roles out there as instructors, as training officers, all throughout the fire service, and utilizing some of the information that's available to us when it comes to these line of duty death case studies, and really understanding what all is out there and how to incorporate that into a training program is really important. So we've got a fantastic panel here with us today, and I think we're going to get some really good information from some of the guys. I'm sure if you're tuning in today, you're probably recognizing a lot of the faces here and a lot of the names that you'll hear from over the course of the next hour. Really a tremendous panel, so welcome. My name's Brad French. I'm a lieutenant in Dayton, Ohio Fire Department, and also on the board of directors as the Eastern Regional Director for the ISFSI, the International Society of Fire Service Instructors. My usual co-hosts, Steve Pegram and Aaron Heller, are both tied up today. I think Aaron is doing some teaching abroad, and Chief Pegram is headed out to Tulsa for a meeting. So sorry to not have them with us today, but I would imagine they'll be back on next month. So thank you for all being with us today, and we'll go down and introduce our panelists here in just a little bit. As we go throughout the next hour, keep in mind you can interact on social media. I'll try to keep an eye out, and Shannon in the background at Penwell will keep an eye out as well for the hashtag FETalk on social media. So if you have questions and comments and things like that, maybe some questions for the panelists, like I said, great group today to throw out some questions to, so we can certainly address some of those as they come up if you utilize that hashtag FETalk. Sometimes Chief Halton joins us. I don't believe he's going to be joining us today, but we would typically kick it over to him for some thoughts and some insights. I will say good luck to all of the folks that submitted for FDIC for next year. Obviously that process is closed now, and we all wait, myself included, with bated breath over the next several months to wait to hear if we got picked up next year. I'm sure a lot of you tuning in are in the same boat. So that process is ongoing as we speak. So good luck to everybody that submitted it all. I'm sure it'll be a tremendous conference. It's like Christmas or Disneyland for us all in the fire service every year. So certainly looking forward to that already for next year. So as I said, our topic is honoring sacrifice through training and talking about line of duty deaths. Certainly if you pay attention to social media, Twitter, Facebook, so on, a lot of the fire service websites, there's a lot of talk about line of duty deaths, and certainly a seeming resurgence lately of statistics as they specifically relate to line of duty deaths. And a lot of important points get brought up in that conversation a lot. One of which is we don't have firefighter fatalities seemingly at as high of rate involved in direct structural firefighting as opposed to many of the other things. Anybody that's studied the fire service for more than a minute certainly realizes that our highest causes of line of duty deaths are things like heart attacks and medical related issues and vehicle accidents and things like that. And that's absolutely true. But that also doesn't diminish the importance of studying the traumatic fireground line of duty deaths. If you subscribe to the secret list through firefighterclosecalls.com, Billy Goldfeder's website, you've seen already today that it's the anniversary of the Waldbaum's fire up in New York City, where 6 firefighters lost their lives after a number of them went through the roof. And so incidents like that are never going to diminish in importance, right? Even if the leading killer of firefighters is heart attacks and vehicle accidents and things like that, those traumatic incidents certainly don't diminish in importance and are just as important, and the modern day versions of those, right? Whether it be the Charleston 9 or whatever, those incidents are not going to ever diminish in importance, regardless of what the leading causes of firefighter fatality statistics each year are. So I think it's important that we address this, and hopefully we have a good discussion here. I think what I'd like to do is I'll throw out a first question, and we'll allow the panelists to all introduce themselves. Again, as I said, this is, unless you fell off the truck yesterday, you already know who all these guys are, but I'll have them introduce themselves and address the first question, which is, why is studying line of duty death incidents important to you? Whether that be on a personal level, whether it be on a professional level, or some combination of both. Why is it so important to study the past in our business? So Chief Van Dorpe, I'll start with you.
I don't like going first. That's right. Too bad. I thought I was going to be last. I'm on the far right side. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Pete Van Dorpe. I'm the fire chief in Algonquin-Lake in the Hills Fire Protection District. I've been out here now for close to 4 years. I spent the bulk of my career with the City of Chicago Fire Department, and I ended there my last 3 years as the training director. And why that might be relevant to today is because in Chicago, like a lot of places, the training division, a lot of ceremonial things, including line of duty death funerals and related stuff, gets processed through the training division. So I had, unfortunately, a large hand in 5 line of duty deaths in my last 3 years with the Chicago Fire Department. And then the other piece of this is that I am part of the Underwriters Labs Advisory Board for the Firefighter Safety Research Institute. And because of that work and that association, I've participated in a couple NIOSH investigations and/or reviews on line of duty deaths. So I have some perspective that maybe your average firefighter doesn't have, unfortunately. To your point, Brad, the question why study them, I think the short answer is if we're going to be calling ourselves a profession and consider ourselves professionals, then that's one of our mandates. You have to look yourself hard in the eye when something bad happens and say, why did this happen and how did it happen and what do we do to fix it? That's part of what professionals do. They self-police, they self-correct, they self-evaluate, they do all that sort of thing. The medical profession does, engineering professions do, and we need to do the same. And that is part and parcel of what we are mandated to do as a professional organization, is look at ourselves and say, what happened here and how do we prevent it from happening? How do we all learn from it? So I think it's pretty straightforward, pretty simple, because we have to.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. The old saying about those who don't study history are bound to repeat it, right? Certainly the fire service is no different. And that concept absolutely applies in our business. We see so many similar lessons learned amongst a lot of incidents. Tony, let's go over to you.
Good afternoon. My name is Tony Carroll. I'm a captain with the DC Fire Department on a ladder truck there, and volunteer here in Northern Virginia where I live. I'm also a board member with the ISFSI. And something that, why do we want to learn? Well, it's something that's near and dear to my heart. Several years ago, I started doing a May Day Monday for my guys at work. It was kind of, just for us, and we work one Monday a month. Then I got into the safety office and I thought, let me take this. There was some suggestions to maybe take it to citywide, and we did. I was doing it, issuing it out. Also, what was very kind of frustrating, which might be a subject of another Humpday Hangout, was all these kids on their phones, and how can we reach out to them? So the suggestion was take the May Day Monday social media wide. So we did that within the DC Fire Department. We also emailed it out and stuff. But part of that May Day Monday is try to connect with people through a line of duty death. Again, like the chief said, and Brad, you said, we repeat. We repeat these things, and why we repeat them. So maybe we can show something that happened that we can keep our fellow firefighters from doing again. Again, honor their sacrifice. We don't know much about these guys who have passed and girls who have passed. So let's honor their sacrifice, what they did, by showing, by making sure everybody understands and know what happened and what happened on the fire. Again, it's not always a big city fire. It might be a little fire that only a few people knew about. But NIOSH or a report has done a good job of kind of showing it and telling us what happened. So let's bring that out so everybody knows it. The May Day Monday campaign revolves around a line of duty death. And is there a subject that happened in that line of duty death that we can highlight on this May Day Monday? So that's kind of why it's really important to me to highlight these people and honor their sacrifice.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we talked about earlier a little bit in the pre-show, and I talk with people all the time about, is being respectful in how we deliver this information, being very respectful in how we approach this topic. Because as I said at the outset, it absolutely can be very emotional. It's something that sometimes people don't want to talk about, but when it comes to the word respect, I think it's almost disrespectful not to talk about it, right? If a sacrifice is made, if a firefighter is lost in a line of duty, sweeping that under the rug or being too proud to talk about that is certainly more disrespectful than addressing it. As long as it's done in the appropriate manner, in the appropriate time frame. We all know and have seen the immediate Monday morning quarterbacking on social media and things like that anytime a clip is posted, and certainly that rubs folks the wrong way, and rightfully so. But it's disrespectful also not to talk about it and to say, well, that's off limits. I mean, you can't it's something that needs discussed for sure. So Dan, I'll kick it to you. What's been your background on interaction with some of these line of duty death incidents, and why do you feel that it's important to the fire service?
So I'm Dan Madrzykowski, and my background is I'm a fire protection engineer, and spent a large part of my career over at NIST. I'm currently with UL Firefighter Safety Research Institute, and we continue to have a great relationship with NIOSH, and they ask us for input and reviews of their reports. We continue to look for opportunities to provide good insight as well as research data or previous line of duty death studies to help point out some of the issues in a current report that they're working on. So my connection to this was really the first fire was the Cherry Road fire in Washington, D.C. back in the 90s. And up to that point, researchers in sort of spits and spurts at NIST, at other research organizations under contract with the U.S. Fire Administration, had been doing research for the fire service, and it wasn't really catching, right? There'd be little bits of it. The research was done that ended up in evolving into the standard for the turnout coat and then turnout gear and bunker gear and things like that. So that's sort of where the research was taking hold. But with regard to what was going on the fire ground, or what firefighters were being taught in terms of fire behavior, there really wasn't a connection. And when the fire department in Washington, D.C. then asked for some assistance to help clarify what happened on that fire scene, that was really the first time that this concept of doing research with the fire service and doing something to help assist the fire service in terms of numbers and data crunching and all that sort of thing really came into play. And so we did a very early version of FDS, the Fire Dynamic Simulator model. It's a computational fluid dynamics model to help understand the flow path in the Cherry Road fire and how changes in ventilation resulted in that flow path. And then, of course, other questions just started to follow from that. In terms of continuing this, we're currently working with ISFSI on a basement fires project, understanding and fighting basement fires. And of course, once again, the idea of how that basement fire is vented and how these the flow path evolves and where the firefighters are positioned, where the water is, when the water is, the coordination of that all comes into play. And we're doing it just outside of the city of Philadelphia, and Commissioner Teal has been involved in this project as well, and for good reason. They in 2014 they lost a firefighter, Joyce Craig, in the exhaust of a flow path from a basement fire. And there's, as with any line of duty death, it's never any just one thing. There are several things that always come into play. But when I was on the fire scene, I was really taken aback because there were so many similarities between this row house in Philadelphia and the construction of the basement and the way the event kind of evolved that in many ways it was very, very similar to Cherry Road. I mean, they had a wood paneled basement. They had combustible ceiling tile on the ceiling. very similar to what was installed in Cherry Road, the debris we found and that kind of thing. So, again, it's one of these things like we've progressed almost 20 years from that original event, and yet here's a major department that doesn't quite have that understanding or hasn't taken that lesson to heart for whatever reason. And I know that Commissioner Teal is working very diligently to get some training going and things like that in that regard.
So that really brings up the next piece of this, which is the translation of it, right? How do we translate this data? Dan, like you said, you've been doing this. You've been doing these simulations and been doing some of these, and the investigations have been going on for 20 years, right? The information is there. What is the key piece to translating this to the local fire department level? Is it what are some best practices that have worked for you guys? I'll speak to my, just as an example, for one of the things as a company officer at an engine company, I would just take my laptop computer in the morning and just around the coffee table, just myself and my 3 firefighters, and we would watch one of the FDS recreation videos that you did in your work with NIST, whether it be San Francisco or whether it be Cherry Road or whether it be the Prince George's County close call near, serious injury incident or whatever it was, and watch that video, close the computer and just say, all right, guys, let's talk. Let's talk about our building construction. Let's talk about what we're going to do if we have that type of scenario, and mention those firefighters and where that was. And if it was a line of duty death incident, and this may sound corny to some, but even mention their names, right? Nobody in your crew is going to know them or anything like that, more than likely, but it's worth it that at my roll call at Engine 4 in Dayton, Ohio, these names of these firefighters get spoken to my 3 guys. And again, do they remember them? No, but the point is that we're honoring their death and putting a face and a name to why it's so important that we study this stuff, right? Just to take it off on a little bit different tangent for just a second, when we're doing instructor development stuff and fire instructor classes and things like that, we talk about the different learning domains, right? The cognitive and the psychomotor and the affective domain. And trust me, I'm not going to get down into the weeds on that stuff. Nobody cares. But the idea of the affective domain of learning is that it taps into emotion. It's the part of the learning that makes them want to care, not just their ability to regurgitate information, but tying some type of emotional connection to it to really make the person want to know. And I think using line of duty death case study incidents, whether those be videos or reviewing NIOSH reports or whatever, tying a training topic to a specific incident, especially at the outset, really taps into that effective learning domain and really makes those students pay attention, maybe perk their ears up a little bit, maybe open their eyes a little wider and pay attention to what's going on when they know that there's a specific incident, a specific name or something like that tied to it. And we did a lot of that as company drill, utilizing those videos, utilizing NIOSH reports and different things like that, and had a lot of success with it on a company level. What are some of your thoughts, all of you, on incorporating this stuff both at the company level and maybe at a department-wide level? What have been some of your best practices and successes with incorporating some case studies into training? Chief?
Brett, I think you hit right on the thing. If you don't make this personal, then it's just another report. It's just another online training thing that everybody's got to go through. Sean Gray out of Cobb County, and they do a similar thing. They put they pick a line of duty death and they put that guy's name on their roster every day on their running board up in the station, and they make it a point to talk about that line of duty death. And I think you make a really good point, is that it would help if we took the effort to find out who these guys were. Not just that, Joe died on this day, but who was Joe? And who did he leave behind? And how many years did he have? And what were the consequences of his death? One of my mentors in the fire service, a lot of guys' mentors, was Bob Hoff. Bob Hoff is still in the fire service. He was fire commissioner for many years in the city of Chicago. His dad died in the line of duty. And on January 14th, on Valentine's Day, and I'm sorry, Bob, I forgot the year, but of course, Bob didn't forget the year. And one of Bob's many messages about this is part of every day of his life since then is February 15th, right? It's like part of every New York City firefighter's day is January 12th, okay? I'm sorry, September 12th. So these things have real impact that lasts a lifetime, not just that one day, not just during that event, and not just to that department. Part of every day, excuse me, of these guys' families and their friends' lives revolve around that loss. It's easy to lose sight of that. And I think that's part of the lesson when we're training on this, is not just the mechanics of how this guy passed away or the mechanics of his sacrifice, but what does that sacrifice really mean? And it's not just the line of duty deaths, it's also the traumatic injuries, the life-changing injuries that affect people and their families for their lives. And if we don't make that part of what we learn from this, then we're not really learning. It's not becoming effective, right? It's not going to really impact us. We got to personalize it. We got to have the courage to personalize it, because it's a very personal thing.
Yeah, that's a great point, Chief. And one of the things, as you were talking about, and absolutely, I agree 110%, the importance of personalization. When it comes down to the mechanics and the nuts and bolts of these incidents, one of the things that popped in my head as you were talking about that is the concept of recognition prime decision making, right? The concept that Gordon Graham talks a lot about, and you can find fantastic clips of Gordon on YouTube talking about it. The concept of RPDM, where company officers, for example, need to have a mental Rolodex, if you will, of these line of duty death incidents popping around in their head. Well, you know, they pull up and they see this circumstance. Maybe it's something they've seen before. Maybe they haven't. Maybe they act on as they did in a similar situation. Maybe their brain defaults to a study of an incident that they read a couple of months ago or something like that. Having these mental pictures of these incidents by really getting down into the mechanics and the nuts and bolts of exactly what happened, and trying to work that into the memory banks of firefighters, in particular company officers that are arriving first and making that go or no-go decision, that moment in time that's really one of the most critical decisions in our entire industry. When they pull up first due, am I going in? Am I going in here? Am I going in there? What exactly are the tactics that I'm going to employ here? The more of this information that we can have bouncing around in those company officers' heads, the better. Whatever we can do to try to get this information out to our organizations, and in a digestible way, right? Not just some way where it comes across their desk and it goes out the other side and they never think about it again, or they just click delete on the email or whatever, but a way that really processes through their brain and is something that's in there to be recalled upon the next time they pull up on something similar. Tony, let's go over to you. What are some ways? You talked about your Mayday Monday project, and I certainly see those all the time on social media. It's great stuff. I like it and share it and all that kind of stuff when I can, and I certainly encourage any of the listeners out there to do the same if they're not familiar with that Mayday Monday concept. And Fire Engineering certainly shares that as well a lot on their website. In addition to that, you've got one of the programs that you do at FDIC is about line of duty deaths. Can you talk a little bit about that and some of the other ways you've tried to incorporate some of this stuff into your training, both at the career side of the house and otherwise?
Yeah, I think that the death, like we say, there may be a accumulation of events that cause that death, but something in there we can probably take away and apply on the fire later on today. We just did this past Monday was the first Monday of August, or coming to the first Monday of August, the 31st of July, coming into August. So we honored the loss of life in Asheville, North Carolina. Captain Jeff Bowen passed away in a firefight there, and it was a 6-story building, a medical building. It wasn't, a crazy high-rise like only a few jurisdictions have. This is probably a building where a lot of people have it. There was some operational issues there, which again, if you get the NIOSH report, it does a good job. But Asheville also did their own internal report, which a lot of times those are a lot more. There's a lot more information there that you're gonna get out of it. NIOSH does a great job, but Chief says it's a NIOSH report. The department report bears a lot, and there's a lot more information. So that's a good one. Asheville, North Carolina, Jeff Bowen, he passed away. There was some CO poisoning, took his face piece off, got disoriented. So what can we get out of that? What I got out of that, one of the things I got out of that was maybe pre-planning your buildings. Why do we get off if we take an elevator to a fire? Why do we get off the floor below or 2 floors below? If you hook up on a standpipe, why do we hook up to the floor below? One of the reasons we do is to go check it out. we go check out that floor below so we know if the fire is in 501, let's go find out where 401 is. How far away from the stairwell is it going to be? Because if I get up there in blackout conditions, I don't want to guess. I want to know how many steps it's going to be, how many doors it's going to be down the hallway before I find that fire. That came out of a NIOSH report. That came out of Captain Jeff Bowen's loss of life and his sacrifice he gave to us. Asheville, North Carolina, I'm sure they know about it. But now DC knows about it. At least the guys on my shift in my company do. And we can do the same thing for the volunteer company. I know, drill nights, it's tough to come up with a topic sometimes. Well, here you go. For the month of August, drill nights on Monday, do a Mayday Monday, and come up with a topic. And here's the drill. Again, like you said, fire engineering picked up on it. Chief Halton picked up. We met one night, and he was like, "Send it in. We'll put it." And he does. They support the getting this message out. With it is a topic. There's a NIOSH report or a local report. This one even came with a video this month, and it comes with a drill plan. So that's how I'm doing it. Because again, these guys, like you say, they might not know about the Asheville Fire Department and the passing of Captain Bowen. Now they do. That guy gave his life. Asheville bared their souls after this fire. So let's recognize that by telling everybody about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Tony, just real quick from a technical standpoint, your mic started to get a little choppy there towards the end again. Sorry about that, brother. You might want to, it was good at the beginning, maybe log out and try to log back in again. We definitely want to make sure we hear everything that you've got to say, brother. One of the things that Tony just brought up, and it sparked another incident in my head, and not to get into any one specific realm of incidents or anything like that, but in the same vein of high-rise stuff, one of the things that popped into my head, if the listeners out there are not familiar with it, is the Four-Leaf Towers fire out in Houston, Texas. That was in October of 2001, and I think because of the timing of it, obviously October of 2001, in some cases was maybe flew under the radar a little bit. A 20-year veteran Houston captain, Jay Yankee, was killed in that fire, and in that scenario, they made the hookup on the fire floor and things like that. There were some disorientation issues, and I'm not going to try to summarize the entire report in a short period of time. But again, some similar lessons learned there, and again, a lot of common traits among a lot of these incidents, and it's important to study that and to have that connection to these. So those incidents are popping around in our head as company officers, as I said earlier. So I want to kick it over to Dan again. And when it comes to incorporating this stuff, I don't want to try to sound like too much of a fire nerd, but I'm kind of a fire nerd about some of the computational fluid dynamics videos and recreations that you've done over the years. Can you give us a little bit more insight into the nuts and bolts of those? I'm sure many of our listeners are familiar with those videos and have watched those, have used them for training. A little bit more of the nuts and bolts into how that works maybe, and how you compare that to fireground footage or fireground video and pictures, and make sure that the accuracy is there and ensuring that level of quality in that, and just a little bit of background on that whole process.
Sure. Well, a couple of things, as you know, is if you look at the Cherry Road case and look at the video from that, you'll notice in Keokuk, Iowa, for example, you'll see a certain level of resolution that sort of goes with the territory. FDS, when we did Cherry Road, FDS wasn't even officially released. We also did another one, the Vandalia wind-driven fire for FDNY, and that one didn't get released because there wasn't trust in it. We couldn't validate it. They said, as soon as the window failed, hot gases rushed down the hall at a very rapid speed. And at the time, in the late 90s, we didn't have any data to support whether that was a real phenomena or that was just something that the model did, because we didn't have reality modeled accurately enough. So as Dr. Kevin McGrattan over at NIST leads the activity on FDS and continues to evolve and improve that. FDS is on version 6 right now. And some of the people that were critical, one of the guys in particular, critical to making version 6 and improving some of the combustion submodels and things like that is Dr. Craig Weinshank, who works with us at UL. And so we keep up on the leading edge of the model itself. understanding how to get the input data in the best way possible so that the submodels for heat transfer, combustion, mixing, do the right thing. So if we have a line of duty death, one of the critical things is to get the geometry of the building. And a lot of people, when they're doing an investigation, typically can do a really good job making a floor plan, but they kind of forget the third dimension. And ventilation is so important to understanding a fire that it's critical to get the sill height of the window, the soffit of the window, same thing with the doors, to get that third dimension into play for all the vents and openings. Then we need to understand the interior finish. What is it made out of? Do we have materials like that that have been tested in a cone calorimeter to get the heat release rate or the smoke production, things of that nature, so that we have that data to accurately plug in. Sometimes, like with the Cherry Road case, we took ceiling tiles that we found and we ran experiments on them to get that data out of the ceiling tile so we could make sure that we had appropriate kinds of information in there. So once we have the materials, we have the geometry. The next really big factor is timing. What happened on the fire ground? What did the firefighters do? What was the environment? Did we have a wind condition or no wind? When were windows broken? In some cases, we're actually using the model to try to help us understand maybe when the windows were broken. Maybe that wasn't recorded. No, I mean, nowadays we get an extra boost in many cases from somebody having a cell phone video out there recording some of the incident. In the Herbie Johnson fire, we had the benefit of a security camera that was run by the city that recorded the front part of the building and what the smoke conditions were and the flame conditions out of the attic and things like that. So it's getting witness statements, it's getting that timeline put together. The timeline is really that backbone, that framework for any investigation and modeling or recreation effort to get a good understanding of that. So typically we run the model many times to try to fill in the gaps for the things that we don't know, to try to get a better understanding of which one matches reality the best. As we're going through the scene, we certainly document the scene so we can see where there were areas of, heavy wood char, indicating that the fire burned there for a while. Where do we have evidence in neutral planes and windows or in doorways where the hot gases were going out the top and the cool air was coming in the bottom? And we try to match that up with the model results to determine, is this what happened? And of course, last but not least, before any of these models are released, they get a review by the department and by members that were at the scene to get feedback from them. Does this correlate with what you saw? Does your experience match, what we had on this? And so that's sort of the fundamentals of it. The modeling still takes a while. You can't run the model in real time. So depending on the complexity and the number of grid cells and everything in the model, it may take several minutes to simulate a second of time, or it may take longer than that, again, depending on wind really cranks up the computational time, and the size of the structure cranks up the computational time. But that's we still feel that's a very important way to get information out to the fire service, and we're planning on doing more of those in the future from UL.
Excellent, excellent. I remember seeing, just talking about the validity and the verification and things like that. I remember as part of the Berkeley Way, when you actually had some side-by-side photographs where there was a photograph on the Charlie side of the structure and how well that kind of matched up with the model and things like that. Real briefly, since we're kind of halfway through here, a little over halfway through, I'll remind everybody out there, feel free to chime in with questions and comments on hashtag FETalk on social media. We have been picking up a few comments about how professionals self-police and how important it is as a profession to continue to analyze this data, gather and analyze the data, and apply that data as well. I absolutely agree. And we got a question also from Bill Carey that we can address as a panel here real quick. How does the panel balance delivering lessons from NIOSH, fire, and medical line of duty deaths, the last three released detailed heart problems? And that's absolutely a valid question, right? Are we, and again, maybe admittedly, even I'll take myself as a case study, right? Didn't spend much time sitting around the coffee table in the morning detailing a medical related NIOSH report. Even in my own, you know, I don't want to say personal bias, but maybe interest level and where I'm drawn to, I certainly would focus on the traumatic related firefighter line of duty deaths. I think part of the reason maybe for me is that concept I talked about earlier with that kind of mental slide tray thing, that whole recognition prime decision making. It's not any less important at all to study the medicals, to study the car crashes and things like that. But I personally try to focus on the traumatic ones more in terms of training value, because those are the types of bits of knowledge and information that I want to try to impart upon those firefighters and fellow company officers and officer development training and things like that. So, but it's an absolutely valid question. I'll toss it out to the panel. Chief, do you think as a fire service we're spending enough time reviewing the medicals, and how could we do better?
Not even close. Yeah, good question for me. I'm the last 8 years of my life I spent trying to make up for the neglect and abuse of the first 50 years. So I've become a bit of a zealot about diet, wellness, health practice, and all that kind of stuff. If your department doesn't have some sort of active wellness program, and I shouldn't have to elaborate on what that is. It's not just about lifting weights. It's about diet, exercise, psychological wellness, mental wellness, all that kind of stuff, suicide prevention, the whole 9 yards. If you're not addressing that, then you're not addressing the line of duty death issue, and a number of other things as well. The challenge with this is that there's many of them. There's a lot of baggage associated with all this kind of stuff. But one of the core challenges is that when a guy dies of a medical related incident, okay, particularly heart attack, whatever, whether we articulate it or not, there's some, you know, belief out there that he brought it on himself in some way, shape, or form, right? Okay, it's the stress of the job, but he wasn't in safe, didn't take care of himself, he smoked, he drank, whatever it is. And that's not just in the fire service, that's anywhere, right? We sort of blame the victim to some extent. And to some extent, it's true. Right, part of what we bring onto ourselves in terms of health and wellness, we bring, you know, it's our own lifestyle choices. Our lifestyle choices probably impact our health and wellness as firefighters more than our job does. That doesn't mean it's not job related. We have to understand that part of this job is stress, part of this job is anxiety, part of this job is sitting around for a long period of time and then jumping up and going full speed ahead in a relatively short period of time. If you're not addressing that on a day-to-day basis, if you're not trying to have some impact on that, then you're not addressing the whole line of duty death and on-the-job injury issue. It's harder to do because, please forgive me for using this reference, but it's not sexy, right? It's not dramatic. It doesn't have all those bells and whistles that come with the other events. And so it's easy to pass over on those and say, let's go look at this other one. Where this thing happened, where this event happened, where things out of our, you know, there's a lot of lessons to be learned about that guy that died from a stroke, a heart attack, whatever. You know, we had a guy leave our job here in Algonquin. Fortunately, he survived it, but he had a massive stroke. And it was right before he was ready to retire. It's not the way the man wanted to leave the job. He had a brother on the job. He's got a son on the job. And again, that impacted our department and our service just like any line of duty death would in the same way. How could this have happened? Why didn't we do that we could have done to help prevent this? Suicides are the same thing. We've lost 2 guys out here right after they left us. They were in other jobs when they passed away, but we lost 2 guys to suicide out here. And every day, some part of every day is the day after those guys we lost them. Right. And so if we're not picking up on these things as every bit as important, if not more so than the traumatic ones, then we're really missing the boat. And I think that's, pardon me for belaboring this, but that's part of how you institutionalize and integrate this. We always have to continue to be learning from these things, because the traumatic ones, fortunately, only happen once in a while. You pointed that out very early on. The untraumatic ones happen routinely. Most of that 100 count every year are traffic accidents and health-related line of duty deaths. So if we're not making a concerted effort to address those, then we can't institutionalize the lessons learned part of this thing, if we only do the traumatic ones. So by all means, that has to be part of the discussion on a regular basis. End of rant.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And one of the things that keeps continuously kind of churning up to the top of my thoughts, and I keep a close eye on, social media and things like that on a pretty regular basis on a lot of these topics. And one of the things I think it's important that we not lose sight of is that the fact that traumatic firefighter line of duty deaths on a fire ground is not the leading cause of firefighter fatality is not a bad thing. Is sometimes I almost think that people take information about how medicals and car crashes and things like that or accidents are the leading cause of firefighter fatalities, and in some kind of a strange way actually use that as a trumpet to say, well, firefighting's not dangerous. Well, this isn't dangerous. We don't need to be concerned about this. Why are we studying this? Why do we have this safety program in place? And all that kind of stuff. And they almost take the data sometimes and it gets shared on social media and people add their comments and things like that. And with not very complimentary things to say about, for example, the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation 16 Life Safety Initiatives program and the Everyone Goes Home program, Encouraged to Be Safe, as well as all the fire dynamics education that's been going on in the past several years, the ISFSI Principles of Modern Fire Tech program, the UL educational programs that are on the website. Sometimes I almost feel as if people take the fact that fire ground traumatic line of duty deaths are trending downward and they use that to say, well, why do we need these 16 life safety initiatives? This is silly. Why do we need this fire ground, fire dynamics training program? Not that many firefighters are dying on the fire ground anymore. And I think we're in this bizarre situation where it's like a cart before the horse kind of thing, and not realizing that the reason that some of those line of duty deaths, traumatic fire ground line of duty deaths, may potentially be trending down, or at least a certain piece of that could be because of the success of those programs.
Yeah, you got to get Dan.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Brad, but maybe we get Dan to chime in here because I'm not sure they're trending down. The raw numbers might be trending down, but so are the number of fires.
Sure, absolutely.
Last time I looked, and I'll admit it was many, many years ago, but the last time I looked, actually the health-related is trending down. The traffic accidents are trending down, not as they should be. Now, again, we're not talking about raw numbers. We're talking about percentages and per incident.
Sure.
But traumatic injury and death on the fire ground per fire is trending up. And Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm dated, or if we got better information. I don't know.
No, I mean, that's from NFPA that they had showed that if you do the numbers on per 100,000 fire incidents, that the trend for traumatic line of duty deaths on the fire ground was actually going up from 1.8 closer to 3.0. FDNY did their own study, and they sort of looked over a 50-year period, and they looked over a period where they definitely did not have full bunker gear, starting from the 50s and going up into I think the early 80s. And the numbers of people dying on the fire ground were certainly larger. And again, this excludes the tragedy on 9/11. But when they did the most recent 25 years, the numbers, I believe there were 43 line of duty deaths, again, not counting 9/11 in that time period. The thing that had changed was in the previous 25 years where there were over 100 line of duty deaths in New York, only 4 of those members died basically by getting burned up. And out of the 40, I believe 14 of them died by getting burned up. So but before, the big cause of death was asphyxiation. They didn't have SCBAs, they didn't have respiratory protection. So the acute cause of death at FDNY has been going down with regard to asphyxiation, but other acute causes such as getting trapped or collapse or burned have been going up a little bit. And I think this brings up a really good point that the traumatic injury on the fire ground we see as sort of this acute, happens really fast in seconds and minutes, the damage is done. I think that the fire service as a whole, which includes heart attacks and health and wellness, is also now looking more at the chronic impact of their job. What happens when you're not on the SCBA and you get a little bit of smoke here and there? How does that add up over time? We're not sure. I think the evidence is in that it's probably not good for you, but we're just not quite sure how bad it is, I guess. So I'm excited that UL and the University of Illinois and NIOSH and Skidmore College have been working together, looking at heart-related issues, cardiac-related issues, chemical exposures, and different firefighting tactics and fire dynamics. And the results from those studies are now starting to come out. And the interim results were released in Fire Engineering, I believe, last December. And now one of the first journal articles that's available free to the public. And if you follow us on Twitter at UL_FSRI, or if you follow the University of Illinois at IFSI research, you can get a link to these reports, and the findings are very interesting. It's bringing everything together, right? So they're swabbing firefighters, they're checking their urine, they're checking their blood, they're checking their breath before and after they fight a fire. They're looking at their gear, what's on their gear, what's getting through their gear. They're looking at how to decontaminate the gear. They're looking at fires that were started with a transitional attack, or it was given a shot from the outside before they went on the interior, versus firefighters that just went directly into the interior. And in some cases, the people that have the highest core temperature are folks that never went inside, regardless whether it was a direct interior attack or a transitional attack. The folks that are trying to cut a hole in the roof may have a higher core temperature. Some of the people that have some of the higher exposures are people that are not wearing turnout gear. They're pumping the engine, but yet they're either getting diesel exhaust, the results of diesel exhaust, or the results of some of the smoke that's blown from the structure, over their position and getting on their skin and being inhaled and things like that. So again, this is a time where this research has never been done before. And now we don't know what we don't know. So now we're going to start learning to try to put all these puzzle pieces together to address the whole package, that it's not just about the traumatic deaths on the fire ground, but all the deaths over the course of your career that are important. And again, this is a similar theme that's voiced by the National Fallen Firefighters as well. They're having a cancer symposium upcoming here in Phoenix in a month or so.
Yeah, Dan, I think it's fantastic that you brought up some of the work of Dr. Horn and Illinois Fire Service Institute and that whole project. That's been some tremendous stuff, and it kind of made me chuckle a little bit. If I had a nickel for every time the acronyms IFSI and ISFSI got switched around, it would it happens a lot. But anyways, that's absolutely some fantastic work, and it's been neat seeing some of that start to come out in some of the trade magazines and things like that. Tony, I want to kick it back over to you for a while, brother. What are your thoughts on medical related line of duty deaths and how those pieces fit together in the training program with addressing traumatic line of duty deaths?
I think it's we've done a really bad job. It's specifically, I'll talk to you about my job. The last two line of duty deaths. The last one was Kevin McRae, lieutenant. He died. He came out of the building and died, collapsed right after running up the stairs and then coming back down. He really didn't do a good job of taking care of himself off the job. NIOSH report came out about that. We have reviewed it on duty. Again, it's horrible because I'll admit I only have 8 days a month, 7-8 days a month with these guys that I work with. I'm hoping, and again, this is maybe this is what the fire service does. You hope that they take care of themselves while they're off duty. Now we definitely can help them with maybe nutrition, give them some ideas on the right things to eat. We need to come into Firehouse and take some of the bad things we have in the Firehouse out. The things that we eat in the Firehouse are tough. And that's my personal problem there. That again, as much as I train the guys on getting out of a fire, we need to train them on eating too. And I haven't done that. And that may be the elephant. Maybe that's the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. Yes, this year, right? We had, what was it, 51 on-duty deaths the first half of this year. 31 of them were non-emergency related. So I know that vehicle accidents are trending up. I listened to a webcast earlier this week or last week with Bill Carey on he was going over his stuff with PJ and Frank Ritchie about the the actual numbers, so we can weed through the they throw that out there, 100 line of duty deaths a year. Well, let's look at them and see what's really killing us. I agree. I think that the 16 life safety initiatives, the emphasis on fire dynamics, all those things, because we are raising the awareness out there, that's maybe helping with our fireground deaths. Absolutely. Now maybe we can do the same thing with health, with our health stuff. You're right, Chief, when you say it's not sexy. The other thing too is that guys aren't coming in today eating a donut and dropping dead. So how do we then say, look, don't do this? Just like the cancer thing, guys aren't going to a fire today and dying of cancer tomorrow. It's taking years. So the guys, it's tough to get the guys to hook up the hose, the Netterman system, or whatever you're using for your exhaust system. It's tough to wear that to get the guys. We have a tough time now getting guys to wear their tanks on the roof because they think that, well, I got away with it for so long. Well, that's not the right attitude. We need to have zero tolerance for that. We also need to have zero tolerance for the fried chicken and the other stuff that we're doing in the firehouse. I'll take the blame. I'm not doing that well as a company officer, and we need to work on that.
Yeah, absolutely. You brought up. Go ahead, Chief. I'm sorry, Chief. I thought you said. I thought. Anyway, Tony brings up a really good point, which is the company officer setting the example, right? Whether that be eating as one thing or working out or whatever, the importance of the company officer really setting that tone and setting that pace for the company and being the adult, right? There's a reason that you're making a little bit more money than everybody else. You're expected to exercise that leadership, right? You're expected to have a little bit more knowledge and initiative and things like that. And when it comes to hooking up the exhaust system, don't take no for an answer. Just make them do it, right? When it comes to working out and things like that, don't just say, hey, you guys need to go work out. Let's say, let's go work out. Let's all go down to the gym and work out or something like that, right? Setting that example as the company officer. When it comes to silly things like car fires, dumpster fires, don't take no for an answer on the SCBA. Right? I know it's just one of those things, but it's, and so many people have gotten away with it for so long that it's just become the norm, but just make the change at the company officer level. I really think when we incorporate this stuff, and that's obviously what we're talking about today, is incorporating it into a training program. The two best times to do that, at least in my opinion, are at the very beginning and then at the promotion to company officer, right? At the very beginning in drill school, as you're teaching them the basics of firefighting, really going much more in depth than we ever used to on the concepts of fire dynamics because we know so much more now, really going down into the weeds on cancer statistics and heart attacks and strokes and PTSD and suicide rates and all that kind of stuff. Everything we know, incorporating that at the base level in a drill school type environment is absolutely an important way to set the tone for the next generation of the fire service, right? And then the other time when you really have that chance to capture that audience and have your personnel as a captive audience, I should say, is when they're going through their officer development training. When they make that first promotion, for example, to lieutenant or to captain or whatever. You have them in that officer training mode, whether that be a setup, 2-week, 3-week academy or something like that, if your department has the resources and the size to do so, or whether you just have them do some orientation or whatever the case may be, capturing them at the company officer at that first promotional level and really injecting those ideas, those concepts of fire dynamics and health and things like that at that level, I think is important as well. At least that's my take on it. So we only have a few minutes left here. So what I'd like to do is go down the line again with any final thoughts that you have on this, and also maybe if you had a magic wand and could make something in the investigative process or reporting process work better or more effective or figure out a way to get that information out there better, is there anything that you would do to fix the fire service in a quick instant to make this exponentially better? Any final thoughts and a magic wand moment to improve our studying of line of duty deaths?
I'll speak to, you asked me earlier, Brad, about a class that I gave at the FDIC. Is it feedback again? Is there a problem?
No, you're good.
Okay. I did a class at FDIC where if you want to, if you don't want to look at the research, I know there's a lot of guys out there who are like, why are they studying this fire stuff? Why are they looking at these fires? And I get it. You know, maybe you don't want to look at that. Maybe you think that why don't bud their heads in here. But one of the things that we're not doing is paying attention to some of these reports. You know, we looked at Cherry Road, the work that Dan did on Cherry Road. That was my firehouse, my shift. We actually, the ladder truck was out of service and I was detailed away. But that was one of the things, one of the reasons why that might have happened is our truck wasn't in service for that fire. But we don't learn from that. You know, we're doing some research now into basement fires. Do we really need to do that? Because we got lots of line of duty deaths that are showing us that these basement fires are burning the same way. We're just, do we need to look at those reports? Do we really need any more research? I mean, I think we do, because it definitely validates this stuff. So both of them go hand in hand. The research that's going on, you know, again, is it the research that the fires are validating, or is it the fires validating the research? You know, they go both ways. And if whatever we can do to learn from these line of duty deaths is what we need to do. Now let's go to what's really killing us: the cardiac issues, the cancer things. We need to treat those just as well. And you know, maybe this is we need to get some studies on those. The study that the Illinois Fire Service Institute did, that's some really good stuff. Is that really telling us about eating? Maybe we need to get them to do one about eating in the firehouse and what we should be preparing and how to make these healthy foods for our firefighters to eat. But if the research that we did helps on basement fires, maybe again the push on research for eating healthy, for cancer, and all those kinds of things could highlight those problems. If that's what we really want to reduce these numbers, then we need to do the same for both, for traumatic deaths and for the medical deaths.
Yeah, Tony, I think healthy eating in the firehouse will unfortunately arrive at about the same time those full wraparound European helmets arrive. Dan, some final thoughts on this.
Well, just so you know that the FEMA grants, the Assistance to Firefighting grants, also fund grants on healthy eating for the fire service. Dr. Sarah Yankee has led some of these studies. Some of the studies have resulted in hooking up with a farmer's co-op and having green vegetables delivered to the firehouses to see if they're just laying on the kitchen table. Will somebody actually, you know, pick them up and cook with them and use them and eat them? And mixed results, I would say. But that is going on, and that's an important factor as well. With regard to line of duty deaths, I would really like to see more of the line of duty injuries and or the near misses investigated. And part of my selfish reason for that is many times with the line of duty death, the only person that we can actually get the ultimate answer from is no longer with us. And so we're always left with a little bit of uncertainty at the end. Okay, we understand how the fire moved, but you know, did the window fail? Did they take the window? Did the can take the window? You know, what exactly happened? What were they trying to do? We found their body in an odd position. You know, did they get past the fire and return? Or, you know, what's going on? Some things, you know, don't always make complete sense at the end of the day. So for that selfish reason, like the wind-driven basement fire in Prince George's County, everybody's alive after the fact. The interviews can take place. You get a better sense of, all right, this is what really happened, and this sort of completes the package. The other thing, you know, IAFC still has their near miss program going. As a researcher, we've been trying to mine that data, but again, it seems like it's underreported. I think they have 6,000 incidents cataloged, but if we understand sort of the pyramid of how, you know, how many near misses we should have for every serious injury and every line of duty death, it would indicate that there's a lot, that most of them are not reported. So ideally, I would like to see that happen in some sort of automated way, so we're not putting additional burden on the company officer with regard to their reports, and then maybe have the opportunity even there to maybe do a CFD model or another sort of research-related study on that near miss, again, in more of a preventative fashion, where typically the line of duty deaths at that point were reacting. to something bad, that's already occurred. So I would like to see us be able to move a little bit more on the prevention side if we could.
Excellent. And I believe firefighternearmiss.com is just to give that a quick plug, I believe is the website for that program. Chief Van Dorpe, a few quick words to get us out of here.
As usual, Dan, Uncle Dan has the insight that we wish we all had. More of our attention needs to be where it isn't right now. And don't wait for the line of duty death. Figure out the real way to prevent them is to study the near misses. And some shift in emphasis there is probably worthwhile. And I think a similar shift from being healthy to being well would work as well. I want you to, we talk sometimes when I'm doing presentations about it's not about going home at the end of your shift. It's about going home at the end of your career. That's a very different mandate, and it encompasses a whole lot of other decisions than just going home at the end of the shift. So if we can have this broader look at what it means to be fit and well and healthy and safe and all that as a firefighter, then maybe we make the long-term progress. Not just getting through the shift, get through your career successfully.
Thanks, Chief. Guys, it is 2 o'clock. It's actually just a touch after. We ran over a little bit, so be it. But anyway, thank you very much for joining us. We will be back talking training again the first Wednesday of next month. I would imagine Chief Pegram and Aaron will be back as well next month. Thanks very much to Dan and Tony and Pete for joining us and for your comments and questions on Twitter. So have a safe day, everybody. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.